Washington and Mackenzie Gore. The Red Sox visit the Rangers. The Pirates send Paul Skeens to the mound against Sandy Alcantara and the Marlins. The Giants open up at Cincinnati. The White Sox are home against the Angels. The Guardians visit the Royals. The Mets open up the season on the road at Houston. Chris Sale starts for the Braves at San Diego and Michael King. The Cardinals open up at home against Minnesota. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. The Dodgers send Blake Snell to the mound at home against the Tigers and Tariq Skubal. Justin Steele starts for the Cubs at Arizona, where Zach Gallen takes the ball. The Mariners open up the season at home against the A's. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Spring has sprung, and so have the deals at Kohl's Spring Savings Event. I just got a comfy tee for just $7.99, a cute swimsuit for $19.99, 40% off patio furniture for my backyard, and so much more. So don't wait. These deals are too good to miss. Hurry over to Kohl's to save big on warm weather essentials during their Spring Savings Event today. Select styles. Offers end March 30th. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohls.com for details.
Taxes was feeling so stuck. Sitting in traffic, squeezing into a parking spot, all to squeeze in getting tax help during your lunch break. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert who does your taxes for you, while you go about your day getting real-time notifications about their progress and the most money back guaranteed. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
How many SportsGrid listeners does it take to change a light bulb?
It takes 2.
One to change the light bulb, and one to see if our mobile app can provide the same amount of light. Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on this Thursday, it is Football Full Circle, all a part of the SportsGrid Radio Network. That includes Sirius XM, Channel 159. It is FFC. He is Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. A lot to break down here on this show. A lot of quarterback news that we have seen this week around the NFL. What does it mean for these franchises? How does it put their 2025 outlook into context? We will break that all down over this hour up until 1 p.m. Eastern. Lisi guy, there is a new quarterback in New York for the New York Giants. His name is Russell Wilson. After signing a deal with the Giants earlier this week, Russ introduced to the media yesterday, was sitting courtside inside Madison Square Garden on a Wednesday night to take in a Knicks game, making himself a part of the scene here in the Big Apple.
Yeah, and you saw the embrace of Brian Dable and Russell Wilson just a couple of days ago when he made his way into the facility. Everything is great. All expectations. Danger Russ is back in arms, in the tri-state area. You remember when he left Seattle, this was supposed to be the destination for Russell Wilson and his wife, right? That came out in terms of a lot of media hype that he wanted to go to New York. It didn't work out. He went to Denver and then Pittsburgh, respectively, and it only took 3 years, but he's back in the Big Apple. Now, can he elevate this team to potentially a wild card contender? Most likely not, but it really shows the signs and the direction of the New York Giants organization with signing both him and Jameis Winston. They have no shot, I don't believe, to draft a quarterback now. I don't know. You tell me, Ben. With both of these veteran signings, they're more likely to sign Travis Hunter than they are Shedeur Sanders.
There's no doubt about it, Lisi guy. I think it completely changes the draft philosophy for Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, and the New York Giants at 3rd overall. We'll talk about what it means for the NFL draft in just a little bit. Russell Wilson signed by the New York Giants. And Joe, yesterday at his introductory press conference, was asked about how the Giants laid out their plan, what they thought 2025 would look like with Russ on the roster. Basically, did they tell you were going to be the starting quarterback less than a week after signing Jameis Winston as well? And Russ said, quote, yeah, I expect to be the starter and come in here and be ready to rock and roll every day. I think the team's really looking for somebody to lead them in every way, end quote. It's not overly surprising that Russell Wilson would be the starter out of the quarterback room we see right now with the G-men, Jameis Winston and Tommy DeVito included in there. I do think we will see Winston probably play some this year, maybe even start a few games, depending on how things shake out. But, Lisi, you tell me, will Russell Wilson be the starting quarterback for the Giants week number 1 in 2025?
Yeah, I think there's, an 80-20, breakdown to the yes, that Russell Wilson is the starter, barring any major injury that we saw last year with Justin Fields, right? He had the calf injury, and that didn't allow him to be under center for week number 1. But again, you look at Brian Dable, you look at Joe Shane, their backs are against the wall. They need to win now. They need a veteran quarterback. They had this security blanket with Jameis Winston, and that allowed them to then reach, let's say, at Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, and Russell Wilson, and they landed on Wilson, right? It's clear that they need a veteran quarterback to come in, not be turnover prone, and out of both of those guys, Wilson is, more protective of the football than Jameis Winston, and that's going to win football games, hopefully, with this young team. Again, they're at a crossroads. If they take Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, you got to deal with the growing pain. There's no guarantee it's going to be like Jaden Daniels type of success in year number 1, and then both of those guys are out the door, right? For them to keep their jobs and potentially build this organization, by a veteran free agent type of way, this is the best way to do it, right? You got 2 veteran guys. You hope that you can eke out 8 or 9 wins. That's good for a wild card job and playoff spot. And then you could sell it to Mara and say, you know what? We have our sights set and a better plan for 2026, Ben.
Yeah, and I think that is the selling point, right? Russell Wilson elevating this team just enough to maybe be a 6-win football team from what was thought of as a 4-win football team. Frankly, Joe, I don't believe Russell Wilson will be enough for either Brian Daboll or Joe Shane to keep their job. I really thought the investment in a rookie quarterback like Shedeur Sanders might be the wagon they tried to get hitched to. We'll talk about that in just a matter of moments. For Russell Wilson, first 10 years of his NFL career, of course, in Seattle, was a staple of consistency from becoming the starting quarterback in Seattle right away. And Joe, he has been healthy for a good majority of his NFL career. He has played in double-digit games in all 13 NFL seasons. Only 11 last year with the Steelers. That was the fewest throughout his decade plus in the NFL. The numbers are fine. They're mediocre. They're not great. He doesn't have the explosive athleticism and creativity, if you will, to extend plays like he did back in the Pacific Northwest. He's a fine quarterback. He's better than Jameis Winston, probably in terms of at least reliability. He's obviously better than Tommy DeVito. But, Joe, here's where things get interesting for the... Oh, you disagree?
No. I was just going to say you're right. I mean, and they have a star wide receiver and Malik Neighbors that's looking to get the football. He gives them the best option to do that, but the game plan might not be that with Tyrone Tracy in the backfield.
Yeah, and Lacey, they're going to be okay, right? Here's the interesting part for me. The Giants had the longest price to win a Super Bowl, even after the acquisition of Jameis Winston, before the signing of Russell Wilson. To me, he is a name in brand alone. He is not actually a quarterback that I think elevates a team. Maybe one more win, but what's one more win from 4 to 5 in terms of a hunt for a playoff spot, a divisional crown, a conference championship, or, of course, a Lombardi trophy? But the Giants had the longest price at 200 to 1 to win a Super Bowl. Now it's 140 to 1. Shave that price by $60 after the acquisition of Russell Wilson. Still the longest price to win the NFC East. Still the longest number around the NFC at 75 to 1, despite having a shorter Super Bowl price than that of the Carolina Panthers. Maybe that's just where they're getting attention in the betting market. But Lisa, you know well that your good buddy Donnie Rightside, my co-host on the early line in the mornings, saw a total open up, win total for the Giants on ESPN Bet at 3.5. That is atrociously low. In all my times working this show, mainly using the FanDuel Sportsbook, the lowest win total I had seen around the NFL was 4.5, and the over had the juice. That's where I thought the Giants would be. 4.5 juice on the over, 5.5 under having the juice. Well, whether it's Donnie moving the market or everybody else backing that sentiment, that win total for the New York Giants on ESPN Bet is up to 5.5, and the over has the juice. So they believe, the odds market, the bettors, whatever it is, that Russell Wilson is good for 2 more wins for New York. I'm not so sure, but even if that is the case, Joe, I don't think it's much better than 6-11 this year for the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Donnie in that aspect. If you're going to tack a 3.5 on the New York Giants, even if they go 0-6 in the division, Ben, and lose every game to Washington, Dallas, and the Eagles, I still like their chances to get to 4 wins out of conference, right, and out of division. So it's not a bad bet from that aspect. I think, and we could talk about it. Carolina had a 5.5 win total. That was with Bryce Young and all this uncertainty with Dave Canales as a first-year coach. Just think about that and how much of a rebuild that was. You have a veteran guy that's played in the league. You can't take it away from him. He's played in 2 Super Bowls, right? He's won 1. So at the end of the day, that's a significant upgrade from just a rookie or a second or a third-year guy that doesn't have any starting experience. And not only that, I'll throw this out there. I think you're right. Maybe 6 wins, but they might even be better than Dallas Cowboys with Russell Wilson in that too. I believe that. I think Dallas is down.
We've heard some crazy reports about that quarterback situation with Dak in Dallas. We'll talk some rumors. We'll talk more QB news up next on FFC.
4 out of 5 scientists agree it's smarter to be on SportsGrid. And we're pretty sure that one scientist is still a virgin. He just gives that vibe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg. Federal prosecutors are considering seeking the death penalty against Mexican drug lord Rafael Caro Quintero in a sprawling case that includes the 1985 killing of a U.S. DEA agent. U.S. attorneys confirm that capital punishment remains on the table as a possibility. The top count Caro Quintero faces, leading a continuing criminal enterprise, carries a mandatory minimum sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of the death penalty, according to prosecutors. A bill that would relax restrictions on working hours for Florida teenagers is moving through the state legislature. The bill would permit 16 and 17-year-olds to work overnight on school days and work longer than an 8-hour day before a school day. Some 14 and 15-year-olds would also be allowed to work those hours. The bill's sponsor, Republican State Senator Jay Collins, said the measure was, quote, a parental rights thing and that parents can ensure their teenagers who work would not fall behind in school. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Working as a dedicated Fidelity advisor, I always ask, what's important to you? I'll look at those priorities and goals alongside your full financial picture to build a comprehensive plan designed to help grow and protect your wealth. With proactive portfolio insights and an eye on taxes, I'm here to help you make the most of your money. I'm Laura Maxwell, and I'm a dedicated Fidelity advisor. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Progressive knows there are some surprisingly expensive things in life, like frames. Because you found a classic 70s concert poster. But when you went to get it framed, you realized the frame will cost about 4 times the amount of the poster. Which is actually absurd because no one will be looking at the frame, and if they are, then you severely overestimated how cool this poster is. But then you remember by switching your home and auto to Progressive, you could save hundreds and put it towards a classic 70s concert poster in an absurdly overpriced frame. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Not available in all states.
There's something you should know and always remember. SportsGrid does not increase luck. We're your unfair advantage for the latest sports gaming information. If you're looking for luck, go find a horseshoe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. Joe, as we talk about the New York Giants, and maybe their changing outlook courtesy of Russell Wilson, more than likely being the starting quarterback for New York. The Giants still a long price to win a Super Bowl at 140-1, but it was the longest at 200-1 even after the signing of Jameis Winston late last week. Still 75-1 on the New York Giants to win the NFC, longest price, backed by $15 of both the Saints and the Panthers. And Joe, when you look at the NFC East odds, the Giants still the longest number, 20-1 to win that division. In fact, it is still the longest price. No, actually, the Browns now in front at 23-1, the longest price of any team to win any of the 8 divisions around the NFL. All to say, the acquisition of Russell Wilson might make the Giants better, but it does not make them a playoff team. Perhaps it doesn't even make them a team flirting with 500. But, Joe, I think it's really interesting the context that we have discussed for the Giants. You and I were breaking it down on Monday. What does this mean for their draft stock after they sign Jameis Winston? Would they still look to Shedeur Sanders, if at all possible, with that third overall pick? As we said to start the show, it kind of seems as though they're running with that quarterback room. Russ, Jameis, Tommy DeVito. So then what does that mean for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen if the Giants go 6-11 and or 7-10? They're okay. They're not the bottom of the barrel, but by no means are they even in the playoff race. Joe, first off, do you think that's where the Giants will fall this year? Kind of in the mediocre bunch of the NFL? And if so, what does that mean for the Giants and beyond in 2026?
It means a complete rebuild again, not from with the quarterback position. If it doesn't pan out now and they miss out on the playoffs, so they're not an 8-win football team or a 9-win football team, and Russell Wilson doesn't show that he still has a little gas in the tank and tread on the tire, then they're in complete, purgatory and just stuck in neutral, because the problem will be, to your point, they might be a 6-win football team, but that's not going to be good enough potentially to be picking in the top 3, which means then you have no shot to potentially get Arch Manning or another franchise guy coming out. And then what are you going to do moving forward? The fact that they put their chips, and again, we keep going back to this, they made the wrong assessment with Daniel Jones. Now they're paying the price, but now they're trying to save their jobs. So again, you're trying to save your job. You can't say to Mara and the organization, guess what? We're going to go with 2 veteran guys. We're going to get Jameis and we're going to get Russell Wilson. We're set on the quarterback position. We're trying to win now, but at the third overall pick, we're going to get a franchise quarterback. You can't do that, because then all of a sudden now you're stuck. Because then if the team is under 500, you're going to play Shedeur Sanders or let's say Jackson Dart or, Cam Ward if he fell there. What are you going to do? That, now you're going against the game plan and the blueprint of success that you put in terms of free agency with Russell Wilson. So now what you have to do is, okay, you made that bet. It's risky. You got to live with it. But now you have to get either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter to solidify either the offense or defense to challenge the likes of Washington and the Eagles. Forget the Cowboys right now. I think they're done. Yeah. Stick a fork in them, but you really have to challenge the best team in the NFL. Oh, by the way, that happens to be in the NFC East in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles. If you can't do that, you're not going to go anywhere, Ben. And that's where they're stuck. They're stuck right now.
For sure, and they are. And they seem to be in this spot for the Giants where whatever happens this year more than likely doesn't change what the thought is or the plan that very well could be in place for 2026 and beyond. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen not afforded the opportunity to miss out on yet another season. And yet, Joe, it feels as though the signing of Russell Wilson doesn't really change what the previous thought was for 2025. Maybe a win or two, but does it make a bad team a good team, a 6-11 team a playoff powerhouse? By no means is that what we are saying. And still, Joe, it's really fascinating to look at the NFL draft odds because we have more markets available. For instance, the position that a team will use on their first draft pick. Will a team select an offensive lineman, a wide receiver, defensive player, so on and so forth? And yet we still only have first overall and second overall pick odds where there seems to be some confusion at the top of the draft. At least not a lot of clarity right now for the odds makers to put markets out there. We saw the number 2 overall pick odds go live over the weekend. Abdul Carter, an ever so slight favorite in front of Shedeur Sanders. It's an even stronger price right now for Abdul Carter to be that second pick at minus 240. Of course, the Browns hold it right now. Nobody has traded a pick away yet. In fact, all 32 NFL clubs own and still hold their original first round selection. It's going to be interesting, Joe, to see how this changes, but now it does seem as though we will see Cam Ward first overall for Tennessee, and then at 2 and 3, we more than likely are not going to see a quarterback there.
Right. Well, we don't know, right? But it looks that way, that it'll be Abdul Carter, and to your point, and what I believe it'll be Travis Hunter if everything stays status quo. Now, we got to see. We're on the clock come Tuesday. April 1st, that's when all of a sudden these teams start to sweat, and all of a sudden they start to get a little, itchy trigger finger, and we might see some trades start coming underway. And we heard about the big one, whether it's a rumor or not. Does Cleveland potentially trade for Dak Prescott? If that's the case, that could throw a whole monkey wrench into the top three, because then they'd be likely to trade out maybe of the second overall pick and obviously get some more value. We don't know.
Yeah.
But I'll just say this, if we're just looking at best player available, I think, it is really splitting hairs between Abdul Carter to potentially Shedeur Sanders and throw Travis Hunter in the middle. You have three different players that are all great at their respective positions. It's going to come down to team need. And right now, Carter is that guy, but that doesn't mean it can't change. I mean, Travis Hunter, to me, is going to be the guy at number 3 that if the Giants stay pat, he would have the most impact in year number 1 as opposed to Shedeur and Abdul Carter, respectively.
Yeah, it will be really interesting, Joe. That would seem to be a natural fit now with what the G-men have done in their quarterback room to look at a guy like Travis Hunter with that 3rd overall pick. We'll have plenty more around the NFL draft and some more QB conversations next on Football Full Circle.
There's smart and there's not smart. Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Keep it here and win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
1998, the Chicago Bulls and Atlanta Hawks match up at the Georgia Dome. The game draws a crowd of over 62,000, the largest in NBA history.
And yes, we will have a new attendance record of 62,046 for the Bulls and the Hawks here at the Dome, smashing the old record established by the Pistons in 1988.
The Bulls went on to win 89-74. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
New Roar University research finds unremarkably when you burn your hand on the stove, it really hurts. However, if your hand is hidden so you can't see it while it's getting burned, while you're staring at a lifelike rubber hand, it doesn't hurt much. Huh? Kids, don't try this at home, but this confusing rubber hand illusion has uncovered a complicated relationship between the human mind and pain. Maybe leading to effective new therapies for chronic discomfort. However, no information yet on the effects on the nervous system from wearing a rubber nose. Follow me at Capalbo on X, and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Carver and Lisi.
By the way, great intro song, Matthias. I like that. That's going to be the new intro on Wednesdays with Carver and sometimes Lisi. Hey, look at this. I'm in the credits tonight. I made it to the big time. Look at this.
We had a discussion about this last night.
Yeah, I was watching. I got a lot of things going on, Joe. Got a lot of things going on.
I don't understand what you're upset about. You're not on the show that night.
It's Carver and Lisi with Mike Carver and Joe Lisi. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific. On the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go, there you are. Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you. So now you can get the winning edge anywhere. Even while the wife's talking to you. If you got an earbud. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. So the Giants have signed Russell Wilson. That's one quarterback answer for New York. We'll see if another is coming in the NFL draft. So speaking of the NFL draft, either this year or last April, it's very interesting to see the outlook for two organizations as they deal with a potential number 1 overall pick. That's the Titans, and a former 10th overall pick who should be that heir apparent in Minneapolis. Let's start with the Tennessee Titans. Cam Ward, presumed number 1 overall selection, right now in the 2025 NFL Draft, minus 1,200. to go first overall, had his pro day at Miami earlier this week on Monday. Was impressive by all accounts. The Titans were there, and according to some reports afterward, Tennessee is even more infatuated with Cam Ward. They are still willing to listen to offers for that first overall pick, but now the loot would have to be pretty good. Cam Ward even saying afterward that he was talking to Mike Borgonzi, new GM in Tennessee, and told him, listen, I'm going to solidify it today. This is your first time seeing me throw live in person. I'm going to let you know I'm the future of your franchise. The odds makers seem to think that is exactly what is going to happen. Ultimately, Joe, a little bit less than a month from right now, April 24th, 2025 in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The opening night, the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft. The Titans are on the clock. Do they take Cam Ward?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, again, we talked about the swing and misses for the Tennessee Titans organization at the quarterback position with Will Levis and Malik Willis that haven't panned out and have been basically backup type of quarterbacks, even though Will Levis started games last year, not consistent, turnover prone, and wasn't a top 5 draft pick, right? Let's not forget he was taken as the second overall pick in the second round, right? And so, again, when you have an opportunity sitting in the top spot with no fanfare, it's similar to what we talked about last year with the Washington Commanders, right? There was talk about, Drake May, and, would they go with – they were in a position with a new organization and basically the opportunity to take the Heisman Trophy winner, that if they passed up on that opportunity, they would be doing their fan base and the organization a disservice. Same thing with Tennessee. You have Cam Ward. He's calm. He's collected. He's potentially got the livest arm in terms of this draft, much different than Shedeur Sanders. His mobility is an added dimension that obviously we saw Jaden Daniels take advantage of last year and elevate that team to an NFC championship. If they were to pass up on him at this point and let's say trade out or take, Shedeur or anybody else, they would be doing a disservice. He's mobile. He has a live arm. You have to make that bet right or wrong because this is the guy that has the most potential upside. And for the future of the organization, even if you miss, it's a bet you have to make entering 2025.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cut and dry now. It should have been crystal clear, and it is. I think Cam Ward is the best quarterback prospect in this draft class. There is not much of a competition for that mantle at the moment, and I do believe Cam Ward will be that first overall pick by Tennessee. So that seems pretty cut and dry. Everything else after that in the NFL draft, that remains to be seen. Let's address a big rumor that was swirled yesterday by Bruce Drennan, longtime Cleveland sports host and media personality, who on his show on the Big Play Network, they do some great work. I might have made some appearances on that network in the greater Cleveland, Ohio area. But he was saying on his show, he's been in Cleveland for a very, 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 very long time, that he had sources within the Browns organization tell him Cleveland is currently working on a trade for Dallas's Dak Prescott. Now, if that ever materializes, very different thing than a video I'm sure many of you saw. I don't actually expect the Cowboys to trade Dak Prescott. So assuming that doesn't happen, the Browns are still sitting there at number 2 overall, and more than likely going to be trusting Kenny Pickett as their quarterback moving forward into 2025. We'll see if they make other moves. Aaron Rodgers still out there. Russell Wilson no longer is. It does not seem, though, Joe, that another quarterback is going to go in the top 3. Namely, that would be Shedeur Sanders. I don't really think Jackson Dart and or Tyler Shuck are in the conversation of that high of a draft pick, maybe sneaking into the back half of the opening round, depending on what happens here in the next month. But I don't think they're really in conversation for top 5, top 10. Joe, it's seemingly likely now that it's just Cam Ward in the top 5 at first overall, and then who knows when we see Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, again, I still think Shedeur is worthy of a top 5 pick. Somebody has to believe in him, and again, maybe it is the Cleveland Browns. We'll see if it's window dressing or not, but I think he has a live enough arm to succeed in the NFL. We'll see how it plays out over the next few weeks.
More QB conversation next.
The winning edge. You've got it. But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us. But we're working on that. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. It's Major League Baseball opening day across the United States. Things get going this afternoon, 3 Eastern. Carlos Rodon starts for the Yankees in the Bronx against Freddie Peralta and the Brewers. Zach Eflin starts for the Orioles on the road at Toronto, where Jose Barrios takes the ball. Zach Wheeler gets the nod for the Phillies at Washington, and Mackenzie Gore. The Red Sox visit the Rangers. The Pirates send Paul Skeens to the mound against Sandy Alcantara and the Marlins. The Giants open up at Cincinnati. The White Sox are home against the Angels. The Guardians visit the Royals. The Mets open up the season on the road at Houston. Chris Sale starts for the Braves at San Diego and Michael King. The Cardinals open up at home against Minnesota. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. The Dodgers send Blake Snell to the mound at home against the Tigers and Tariq Skubal. Justin Steele starts for the Cubs at Arizona, where Zach Gallen takes the ball. The Mariners open up the season at home against the A's. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Spring has sprung, and so have the deals at Cold Spring Savings Event. I just got a comfy tee for just $7.99, a cute swimsuit for $19.99, 40% off patio furniture for my backyard, and so much more. So don't wait. These deals are too good to miss. Hurry over to Kohl's to save big on warm weather essentials during their Spring Savings Event today. Select styles. Offers end March 30th. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohls.com for details.
Taxes was feeling so stuck. Sitting in traffic, squeezing into a parking spot, all to squeeze in getting tax help during your lunch break. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert who does your taxes for you, while you go about your day getting real-time notifications about their progress and the most money back guaranteed. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
You're listening to SportsGrid, spreading the winning edge far and wide. Terrestrial, internet, TV, satellite, and don't forget our mobile app.
Face it.
The winning edge is everywhere. Somewhere there's a squirrel frustrated he can't get a phone. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. All right, Lisa, guys, we continue to have those quarterback conversations around the NFL. We're talking about some QBs that might go early in the opening round. Last year, we saw 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round, a modern draft era, all 6 in the top 12, including at 10th overall. That was J.J. McCarthy by the Minnesota Vikings. Now, it's been an interesting offseason for the Vikes. Sam Darnold, of course, was not brought back in free agency, as we anticipated, made his way to Seattle, setting the stage for the J.J. McCarthy era in the Twin Cities to truly begin. But then there was some conversation, maybe some rumor around Aaron Rodgers. Would he make his way to Minneapolis? Well, that didn't really happen. The Vikings have basically said we're fully in on McCarthy. But yesterday, Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was speaking with reporters and said that from an organizational decision-maker standpoint, once they talked about maybe having dinner with Aaron Rodgers in those conversations, that J.J. McCarthy, having him as their starting quarterback is, quote, the outcome we want, end quote, and, quote, the outcome we're headed towards, end quote. That feels like some football speak to say that J.J. McCarthy is our top option for now, but it's not exactly the biggest vote of confidence you'll ever see in your life either.
No, and again, I can't understand what these organizations are doing, and I'm talking about 2 in particular. I'm talking about Minnesota, and I'm talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the reason why I say that is, why are they being held hostage by Aaron Rodgers? Again, if you didn't believe in J.J. McCarthy, why did you take him last year? Why did you draft him? If you don't believe he could be the starter, right? And again, I understand that Sam Darnold got the job basically by default, because McCarthy got hurt, but he put up Pro Bowl type of numbers for a majority of the season, and now is with the Seattle Seahawks. Again, if you allowed Sam Darnold to walk out the door, you had to believe that J.J. McCarthy was your guy. If it was hanging in the balance, hoping that Aaron Rodgers would walk through that door as the savior for the franchise, then you know what? Then they deserve to lose. Again, same thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They try to put a Band-Aid on it. last year after Kenny Pickett. They swung and missed. They were wrong. They tried to get Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Both of those quarterbacks now are in New York with two different teams, and you're hoping that Aaron Rodgers says yes and wants to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. If he says no, Mike Tomlin, basically that's rules to be fired if that was his decision. I just don't understand. Again, we're talking about teams now that all of a sudden aren't valuing the quarterback position. It's like, hey, we could just plug and play guys and get the same type of productivity out of quarterback A as opposed to quarterback B. And that is probably true. You know why? Because Pittsburgh's offense has sucked and they haven't opened it up. And they're basically stuck in neutral for the last 10 to 15 years. And that's why they haven't won a Super Bowl since what, 2011, 2012? I mean, give me a break now. It's just a joke. It's a joke. Again, if you're Minnesota, it's either JJ or somebody else. If you don't believe JJ McCarthy is the quarterback, then you should have made moves, or you should be moving up this draft class to get Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart. I don't know.
Yeah, listen, Lacey Guy, I would agree with you, but it seems as though the Browns are kind of set on what they're doing at the quarterback spot. We'll see how all the rumors kind of play themselves out around Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins. Again, not expecting either of those things to happen anytime soon, and I do not expect the Browns to make that selection at second overall. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to ask you a question, right? Because we kick it back and forth all the time. When did the notion of just being able to, get a free agent quarterback off the street, scraping them up off the street led you to a Super Bowl? When did that mentality change when we're paying Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow and Pat Mahomes and all of these marquee and Josh Allen and saying we need a franchise guy? All of a sudden now with Sam Darnold and the Kirk Cousins experiment, we changed our mentality. Where did that get those teams? They didn't win. Atlanta and Minnesota didn't win the playoff game. They didn't win the Super Bowl. So why do Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Minnesota think that they're all of a sudden going to be an NFC and an AFC championship contender by scraping up a garbage guy and bringing him into the facility?
Now, I think that is always the goal, right? That is always the dream, the light at the end of the tunnel. But I think you also do things realistically and try to be as good as you can be. And I don't think any of these teams we are discussing are truly in line because of the quarterback play to be a legitimate conference or Super Bowl championship contender. I know that is always the goal.
Pittsburgh?
Go ahead.
But that's my point, Ben. Pittsburgh, we talk about these Steeler fans. Oh, we have the savior. We have Russ Wilson. He's going to lead it. You went to a playoff game 2 years ago with Mason Rudolph. You bring his ass back into the building, and now you still don't have a starting quarterback for 2025 because you're hoping that Aaron Rodgers is the savior. But for the Steelers that have won multiple Super Bowls, that's really the mentality in 2025 after you had a young team and you made it to the playoffs last year? I just don't get it.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree, Lisa, guy, especially with a Pittsburgh team that just winning games or being a playoff team, it's all about relative expectation and standard of success. Under Mike Tomlin, that doesn't win the day anymore. In fact, that might get Mike Tomlin fired after his 18th or 19th NFL season at the helm in Pittsburgh. It might, because they're tired of it, right? Because that ceiling keeps escaping them and evaporating, where they continue to have success, where they can't even be bad enough to then draft in the top 5 to get the quarterback to run this whole cycle over again. I do think, though, Joe, part of the draft markets that have opened up, first position, the Pittsburgh Steelers draft, they have the 21st overall pick at this moment. A quarterback at 5-1 makes a lot of sense. That could be Pittsburgh making its way up. There has been some conversation around Shedeur Sanders. What would happen if he fell into the Steelers' lap? To me, that almost seems like where this is trending at the moment. We'll get back to Minnesota in a second. But again, I think that's where this could be trending for the Steelers, in one I think at the very least would excite those in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, here's the thing. If it's Shedeur Sanders, no problem. If it's Jackson Dart it could be Kenny Pickett 2.0. Because then you're just hoping, right? I mean, we know the concerns. If you're telling me the 5-1 is they're going to be aggressive, they're going to potentially get rid of, two defensive players to get into the top 3 or whatever it takes to get into that round, then I say, you know what? They had a vision, they had a clear-cut path, and they pulled the trigger. But if it's 5-1 to get Tyler Shuck or Jackson Dart, then give me a break. I mean, again, they have a better shot, and I'm going to scream out to all the Pittsburgh fans on our network and all the Pittsburgh faithful. Pharrell knows. I'm sure he does. Yeah, Pittsburgh has a better shot, the moves they're making, to be the Cleveland Browns than they do to be the dominant Pittsburgh Steelers. Because without an elite quarterback, you're not challenging Lamar, and you're certainly not challenging Joe Burrow in the division to get over the hump. You're not doing it.
It's been the very compelling thing about Pittsburgh. They have always had a winning season, or never a losing record, I should say. Never fewer than 8 wins with Mike Tomlin. Even with atrocious quarterback play the last few years, they have made the playoffs in 4 of the previous 5 campaigns. And yet, Joe, they have not won a playoff game since 2017. They have not reached the AFC Championship game since 2016. And that idea of consistent success, but with a very, very hard cap where the ceiling is not overly high, I think is starting to wear the Steeler faithful thin. We'll talk more about the Minnesota Vikings. What exactly is happening with J.J. McCarthy up next here on Football Full Circle.
We're not saying every SportsGrid listener is a legend, but you might start thinking about who's going to play you in the movie. Just saying. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg. Federal prosecutors are considering seeking the death penalty against Mexican drug lord Rafael Caro Quintero in a sprawling case that includes the 1985 killing of a U.S. DEA agent. U.S. attorneys confirm that capital punishment remains on the table as a possibility. The top count Caro Quintero faces, leading a continuing criminal enterprise, carries a mandatory minimum sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of the death penalty, according to prosecutors. A bill that would relax restrictions on working hours for Florida teenagers is moving through the state legislature. The bill would permit 16 and 17-year-olds to work overnight on school days and work longer than an 8-hour day before a school day. Some 14 and 15-year-olds would also be allowed to work those hours. The bill's sponsor, Republican State Senator Jay Collins, said the measure was, quote, a parental rights thing and that parents can ensure their teenagers who work would not fall behind in school. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Working as a dedicated Fidelity advisor, I always ask, what's important to you? I'll look at those priorities and goals alongside your full financial picture to build a comprehensive plan designed to help grow and protect your wealth. With proactive portfolio insights and an eye on taxes, I'm here to help you make the most of your money. I'm Laura Maxwell, and I'm a dedicated Fidelity advisor. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Progressive knows there are some surprisingly expensive things in life, like frames. Because you found a classic 70s concert poster. But when you went to get it framed, you realized the frame will cost about 4 times the amount of the poster. Which is actually absurd because no one will be looking at the frame, and if they are, then you severely overestimated how cool this poster is. But then you remember by switching your home and auto to Progressive, you could save hundreds and put it towards a classic 70s concert poster in an absurdly overpriced frame. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Not available in all states.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important. That's where we come in. SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week. The winning edge. It's your advantage to more winning more often. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. Lisi, there's a lot of conversation right now around Minnesota, that being the Vikings, and what exactly the plan is at the quarterback position. Of course, the plan is going to be J.J. McCarthy, but it doesn't seem like it's overly flowery right now with how they feel about their starting quarterback. Of course, the 10th overall pick last year in the 2024 NFL Draft after leading Michigan to a national championship. but some of the production and what was asked of McCarthy at the college level is not exactly like he was the best passer we have ever seen of the football. Had a great start during training camp and, of course, a preseason debut for Minnesota last summer before tearing his meniscus, requiring surgery, and ending his true rookie season before it really even got started. Led to Sam Darnold taking over, performing out of his mind, better than anybody could have hoped or dreamed or expected. 14 wins, so on and so forth, as we know. But Sam Darnold leaves. It's J.J. McCarthy's show, or is it? Some rumors, some ties around Aaron Rodgers, even hosting Rodgers and speaking to him during their free agency spending. For the first time since these offseason moves, Joe, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who is that GM for Minnesota, met with the media yesterday and said, basically, we are charting toward J.J. McCarthy be our starting quarterback. It's the outcome we want. But he would not 100% rule out the idea of any further acquisitions at the quarterback spot. Of course, that having to deal with Aaron Rodgers. Mensah saying, quote, for me to sit here and say that anything's 100% forever, that's just not the job. We're responding to scenarios and different information as it comes. So obviously things can change, but right now we're really happy with our quarterback room and we're going to look to upgrade it in different ways. This all follows J.J. McCarthy being on the Up and Adams show on Tuesday, where he was speaking with host Kay Adams and was asked about, has he been named QB1 by Minnesota? He said, no, they have not told me that yet. Of course, McCarthy is from the Harbaugh creed, where he's like, they haven't told me that I have been the quarterback yet, but that's okay with me. I'm happy they didn't, said McCarthy in a quote, because I try to earn it every single day. And I never want that to be given to me. It's such a privilege and opportunity to give me that chance. But Joe, it's not necessarily like, all right, we've got a rookie about to really be a rookie, even though it's his second year, a rookie quarterback that we believe in to be the face of our franchise forever. It's why we drafted him 10th overall. It's why we handed him the keys to this ship. That really hasn't been the sentiment out of the Twin Cities this offseason.
No, it hasn't been. And you know, you would think that coming off the meniscus, seeing how Sam Darnold performed, knowing the potential of this offense, you would want to give J.J. McCarthy the most confidence to elevate his game and just be the starter, right? At the end of the day, this team has potential. So why wouldn't you want to basically, and again, we go back to why did you select J.J. McCarthy if you didn't believe he could be the future face of the franchise? And you put playmakers around them. Shouldn't you be buying into more to J.J. McCarthy than shopping around, especially in his second year when he hasn't even played a game in the regular season, right? Maybe that is the concern. I don't know, but I'll just say this. I believe JJ can be productive when you have the best wide receiver in Jordan Addison and you have TJ Hawkinson there. You have to be able to elevate his game. And again, he should be battle-tested mentally going through the offseason. He's a national champion. Everything is there. But there's got to be something why they just haven't come out and said it, right? I mean, the Atlanta Falcons had more confidence in Michael Penix, right, by making him the starter at the end of the regular season last year than it seems the Minnesota Vikings do in J.J. McCarthy. And if that's the case, why did you select him then? I just don't understand why you pulled the trigger on when you did at that point when you could have gotten a player that could have came in and made immediate dividends right from the get-go.
Yeah, and Lacey, it's such a good point as well, because it does feel like we have said this a few times this offseason. This should be what happens, dating back to the Matthew Stafford thing. Well, the Rams and Stafford prevailing there, coming to an agreement. This should be pretty clear that Cam Ward goes first overall. This should be pretty clear that the Cleveland Browns, in desperate need of a quarterback, draft a quarterback as well. But not everything has really followed in that way. It should be pretty clear the Steelers are a quarterback away from being a true conference contender, and yet this really hasn't mended the way that we expected. And it should have been pretty clear for Minnesota that Sam Darnold was lightning in a bottle. but you weren't going to be able to pay him to keep him there, especially with the draft investment of J.J. McCarthy. And it should be pretty clear that under Kevin O'Connell, who can elevate even a mediocre quarterback, although that's not what you think of McCarthy, that in this offensive scheme, with that offensive talent, they should be pretty good in McCarthy's first full year as a starter, because you should have believed in him enough to anoint him the starter right away if you drafted him 10th overall. And yet it seems like wires are getting crossed just a little bit. Donnie brought this up on the early line, Joe, when we were discussing this very story. He said it reminds him of Trey Lance. The Niners drafting Trey Lance 3rd overall back in 2021. And the conversation around Lance as a prospect should have just been that high upside that he came out of North Dakota State with. And yet when they named him the starter for 2022, it wasn't like, man, this guy's killing it in practice. This guy's the best thing we've ever seen in preseason games. Hey, we believe in this guy. He is our guy. Is it him? Is it Jimmy Garoppolo? We don't really know how we feel about this guy. When it was him and Brock Purdy, who's going to win the job? Oh, it quickly became Brock Purdy's job. Just doesn't feel like there's that gung-ho belief that you would want in your starting quarterback, especially the presumed face of the franchise you drafted 10th overall.
Yeah, and I can't figure out, why. Because, again, they were raving about him after he played that first preseason game, and he hasn't played since. So is it the fact that you don't like the way he's rehabbed? Is it the fact that you don't feel like he's, great in the film room? What is it? Because it can't be, you can't tell me after his first preseason game, he's the second coming of Tommy Kramer and all the great quarterbacks from Minnesota, Dante Culpepper, and all of a sudden now he can't start for a high school team. Give me a break.
It's a really good point, right? What has he not showed Minnesota since he got injured? We'll talk more about it next on FFC.
Luck is winning the lottery. Strategy is settling your divorce before cashing in the ticket.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern. And Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi. Then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Imagine combining the exciting investment opportunity of cryptocurrencies with the power of artificial intelligence to maximize your IRA, 401k, or other investment funds. Listen, if you're looking for ways to accelerate your retirement growth, Block Trust IRA has market-leading strategies and solutions for all levels of investors, from $1,000 to millions. And they partner with Bitcoin Magazine's #1 crypto trading fund in the world to maximize your returns. Plus, their team of IRA specialists is here to help you roll over your IRA or qualified retirement account to the new world of cryptocurrency investments. So make this free call right now to set up your account and learn more.
800-434-5313. 800-434-5313. 800-434-5313. That's 800-434-5313.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
The Minnesota Vikings are all in on J.J. McCarthy, right? Some interesting conversations kind of around the situation in Minnesota. McCarthy telling the Up and Adams show on Tuesday afternoon that the Vikings have not told him point blank yet that he's quarterback number one. He doesn't mind it that way. He wants to earn the opportunity. The right thing to say out of the youngster, who, of course, did not play in the entirety of his rookie campaign after suffering a torn meniscus following a stellar performance in his first preseason NFL game. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who is the GM of the Minnesota Vikings, was speaking for the first time this offseason after the free agency period began and would not rule out 100% that the Vikings will not look to add to their quarterback room. And, of course, that name that comes front and center is Aaron Rodgers. Again, it should be McCarthy's show, and more than likely, Joe, even if they were to add Aaron Rodgers, we would still think McCarthy is in line to be the starter. At least I would. Or what do you have him on the roster for? Minnesota, very intriguing team. Not often, Joe, do you expect a 14-3 football team and a playoff team from a season ago to now win 7, 8, 9 games at max, a 5-6 win drop-off. But that's kind of the thought. If it is McCarthy's show, as we expect it to be in his first true year as a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're going to be a 13-win team, but I don't think they're going to be a 5-win football team, even though the division is very difficult. I put them right in the area of 8. I would say, because, again, we don't know what to expect out of J.J. McCarthy. Can he be, like a Jordan Love type? They hit the ground running in terms of his first time that he was a starter, even like Jaden Daniels was last year. Most likely not. There's going to be some high highs and low lows, and that could lead to wins and losses. But the talent around him, Ben, just from an offensive perspective, Aaron Jones comes back, Hawkinson. I mean, the ability, as long as he's not turnover prone, which he wasn't in his days in Michigan, especially his last season there, you got to believe that they could put up 20 to 23 points in their sleep per game, right? It's just going to come down to the defense, and can they duplicate what they did for much of the regular season last year? If that's the case, then 8-9 is right where, I think they are, and that's a wild card team for the most part.
In Coach of the Year, Kevin O'Connell, who is looked at in a very similar way to many of the great offensive minds around the NFL, Joe. You give him a quarterback, he will craft him into a successful one in the National Football League. Again, all the pieces seem to be in place. If we trust in J.J. McCarthy, the NFL quarterback, both you and I would say last year around this time when McCarthy was thought of as a potential first-round pick, kind of approached it with some skepticism that when you watched Michigan play, McCarthy, to his credit, was not asked to do a ton, but because he was not asked to do a ton, the production and the efficiency were not really there in terms of being that franchise quarterback, in terms of being that guy that you would need in the NFL to lead you to success. You can get by at Michigan with a dominating and physical ground game and a great defense on the other side. It's a different story, of course, as we know it in the NFL. Joe, I think the win total for Minnesota is going to be probably 8.5, the over having the juice. But again, that's a pretty hefty drop-off and decline just from a 14-3 football team a season ago. The Vikings now have the longest price to win the NFC North at plus 550, moving behind the Bears from when the divisional odds opened up. 18-1 number on Minnesota to win the NFC, 8th best price right now. More than likely, that would put them on the outside looking in at a playoff spot in 2025.
Yeah, it's possible. I'll say this. I still believe they're potentially the third best team in the division, even if J.J. McCarthy starts. I still put them above Caleb Williams in Chicago. Forget the offseason moves. It's still a first-year coach in Ben Johnson. It's a new scheme. I need to see that before I buy in completely to Caleb Williams. Yes, on paper, it looks fantastic. But again, you got to play devil's advocate and say, until you show me, I'm willing to bet against it. So again, what does that mean for Minnesota? 18-1. Ben, 18-1, that's a cheap number considering if it is JJ. Doesn't that number baked in 18-1 more an Aaron Rodgers number? Or do we believe that if Aaron does sign with Minnesota, that goes to 12-1? Is that what you're telling me?
It should not. And it would.
It should not, but the Jets were. The Jets were last year 13-1.
I think if you sign Aaron Rodgers, that number moves back because it shows me you have no control of your franchise and you do not really trust in J.J. McCarthy. That's just my earnest opinion. He is Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. Thanks for joining us today on Football Full Circle. Show returns tomorrow, noon Eastern time, here on SportsGrid Radio.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.